A crisp autumn wind swept through the glass doors of the downtown supermarket as Henry Walsh stepped inside, his tailored suit and polished shoes looking out of place among the weary shoppers and the faint smell of detergent and coffee. Henry was the chief financial officer of a multinational company, a man whose days revolved around billion-dollar transactions, boardroom battles, and quarterly earnings. People in the city knew him as wealthy, ruthless, and endlessly composed. Yet beneath the sleek exterior, Henry carried an ache he never shared, an emptiness that came from too many lonely nights in his penthouse, too many meals eaten alone, and too many years without anyone to care for or to be cared by. Success had given him everything but the one thing he secretly yearned for, a family. As Henry strolled through the aisles, he wasn't shopping for groceries. He didn't need to, he had assistants and services to handle all that. But tonight, he had walked in without a destination, his mind restless after another endless day of numbers and profit margins. He found himself pushing a small basket just to blend in, trying to feel, even for a fleeting moment, like an ordinary man. Then he saw her. She stood by the checkout counter, a woman in her late 20s with tired eyes, clutching a tin of baby formula like it was gold. Her coat was worn, her shoes scuffed, and her hands trembled slightly as she counted the crumpled bills in her palm. Henry paused, pretending to examine a shelf of magazines, but his sharp eyes stayed fixed on her. The cashier's voice carried across the counter. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you don't have enough." The woman's face fell, her lips pressing into a thin line as she stared down at her money again, almost willing it to multiply. Her baby, no more than 8 months old, was squirming in the stroller beside her, fussing with hunger. The woman hesitated for a long moment, then with a deep breath, pushed the tin of formula back across the counter. Her whisper was broken. "It's okay. I'll come back." Henry felt something stir inside him. It wasn't pity. It was sharper, more personal, like an echo from a place he had buried deep. He thought of his mother, a struggling woman who had once raised him alone before fate had given him fortune. He thought of the years when he, too, had known what it was to go without. The woman began to wheel her stroller toward the door, her head bowed to hide the embarrassment. Before Henry could think, his legs were already moving. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Excuse me," he said, and the woman froze, startled. Henry placed the tin of formula on the counter again. "Put it on my bill," he told the cashier. The cashier's eyes widened, and the woman quickly shook her head. "No, you don't have to do that," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, I can't." Henry raised a hand gently, silencing her protest. His gaze was steady, not condescending, just resolute. "It's not charity. Consider it a neighborly gesture. Every child deserves to be fed." The cashier rang it up, sliding the tin into a bag, and Henry paid without hesitation. The woman clutched the stroller handle tighter, torn between gratitude and pride. When he handed her the bag, their eyes met. For a moment, she saw not a cold executive but a man with shadows in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with sincerity. Henry nodded. "You don't need to thank me." But as she turned to leave, something inside Henry refused to let her vanish into the night. "Wait," he said suddenly. "At least let me carry this to your car." The woman paused, her face uncertain. "We don't have a car," she admitted quietly. "We'll take the bus." Henry's chest tightened. "Then let me walk you there." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Together they stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against them. The city lights glowed in the distance, and the sound of traffic hummed around them. The baby in the stroller fussed again, and the woman leaned down, soothing him with a tenderness that made Henry's throat constrict. "What's his name?" Henry asked softly. "Ethan," she replied, smoothing the baby's blanket. "He's 8 months." Henry smiled faintly. "Strong name." For a moment, they walked in silence until Henry finally asked, "Forgive me for prying, but why did you have to put the formula back?" Her steps slowed. She looked down at her worn shoes, shame creeping into her features. "I'm between jobs. Rent, bills, daycare, it all adds up. Sometimes I can't stretch it enough." Tonight was one of those nights. Henry felt a pang deep inside. He had seen numbers fail to balance on a spreadsheet countless times, but seeing it play out in real life, in the form of a hungry child and a mother's sacrifice, was different. He glanced at her again, really seeing her now. She wasn't just a struggling stranger. She was resilient, carrying a weight far heavier than her slender frame should bear. When they reached the bus stop, Henry hesitated. Every instinct told him to walk away, to retreat back into his solitary world. But he couldn't. Something about her, about Ethan, had cracked the armor he had spent years building. "Listen," Henry said carefully, "I know I must seem intrusive. But would you allow me to help you? Not just tonight. Maybe I can do more." The woman shook her head instantly. "No, you've done enough. I can't accept anything else." Henry stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. "I don't mean to offend you. I respect your pride, but sometimes, even the strongest people need a hand. Think of it as an investment. In him," he added, nodding toward Ethan. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her lips trembling. "Why would you do this? You don't even know us." Henry inhaled slowly. "Because once upon a time, someone helped me when I had nothing. And it changed the course of my life. Maybe this is my turn to pass it on." The bus arrived, rumbling to a halt. She hesitated, torn between fear of trust and the glimmer of hope his words stirred. At last, she whispered, "My name is Claire." Henry gave a small smile. "I'm Henry." That night was the beginning. Over the weeks that followed, Henry found ways to quietly support Claire. He arranged for her to interview at a reputable firm, without ever telling her that he had called in a favor. He sent groceries anonymously, making it seem like neighborhood aid programs. He even ensured Ethan's daycare fees were covered, masked under a scholarship fund. Claire, too proud to accept outright charity, never realized at first how much of it came directly from him. But as time passed, their paths kept crossing, sometimes by chance, sometimes by Henry's quiet design. Each time, Claire's guarded walls softened a little more. Henry discovered she had once studied accounting before life had derailed her dreams. He found joy in hearing her laugh, a sound he hadn't realized he missed in his own life. Ethan, with his toothless grin and sparkling eyes, grew attached to Henry in a way that felt frighteningly natural. For Henry, the lonely CFO who had measured his worth only in numbers, Claire and Ethan became something priceless. He found himself lingering at their modest apartment, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, learning how to change a diaper without ruining his expensive shirt. Each small act pulled him further from the sterile life of glass towers and silent dinners into a world messy, loud, and beautifully real. But Claire was still cautious. One evening, as Ethan slept, she looked at Henry with pained eyes. "Why are you doing all this? You're a millionaire. You could be anywhere, with anyone. Why us?" Henry swallowed hard, his voice lower than a whisper. "Because for the first time in years, I don't feel alone. You and Ethan, you've given me something money never could. A reason." Tears welled in Claire's eyes, but she turned away, struggling with the fear of depending on someone who might one day walk away. Henry sensed her doubt, but instead of pressuring her, he gave her space. He wanted her to know he wasn't here out of pity, he was here because he chose them. The turning point came one rainy night when Ethan fell sick. Claire rushed to the hospital, panicked and overwhelmed. To her shock, Henry was already there, having driven across town the moment he heard. He stayed through the night, pacing the halls, holding Claire's trembling hands, whispering reassurances until the doctors finally said Ethan would be okay. In that moment, as relief broke through the storm of fear, Claire saw Henry not as a wealthy stranger but as family. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between them only grew. Henry found himself rethinking everything, his company, his wealth, his purpose. For years, he had been the lonely CFO with walls so high no one dared climb them. But Claire and Ethan had climbed without even trying, simply by being themselves. One evening, in the warmth of Claire's small living room, Henry finally spoke the words he had been holding back. "I don't want to go back to living alone in that empty penthouse. I want to be here, with you, with Ethan. If you'll let me, I'd like to build a life together." Claire's breath caught, her eyes wide with emotion. Slowly, she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You already are, Henry. You already are." And for the first time in decades, Henry Walsh, the powerful, wealthy, untouchable CFO, was simply a man who had found his family. Not in boardrooms or in bank accounts, but in the laughter of a child and the love of a woman who had taught him the greatest truth, that the richest life is the one shared.